Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Beginner Blender tutorial, specifically for board game developers who want to create amazing renders for their board games. I wanted to create this to make this amazing tool more approachable to anyone who wants to use it. It might seem a little intimidating at first, but trust me, once you get a hang of it, you can create amazing things very quickly. And that is my goal here, to flatten the learning curve as much as possible. So let's get right to it. Go to the Blender website and download their most recent version of Blender. Don't worry if this is a later version than what you have here. They mostly stay the same, and I've been with Blender since 2.7, I think, 7.9, so it should be fine. Alright, so this is our default Blender scene. We have a cube, a camera, and a light. In order to look around, we can hold the middle mouse button to orbit around the center of what we're looking at. And if we hold shift, we can sort of pan around. Left, right, up and down. To zoom in and out, we can use the wheel. And to select objects, we simply left click them. We can have different camera views using the number pad. If you don't have the number pad, I highly recommend using a keyboard because it will give you a lot of shortcuts. But if you don't have a number pad, you can use this menu over here. But this is basically to quick jump to different views. You press 1, you go see the scene from the left, 3 is from the right, 7 from the top, 9 from the bottom, and with 4 and 6 you can sort of spin around, and with 8 and 2, up and down. In order to focus on the camera and to see what the camera is seeing, we can press number pad 0, and that snaps us right to the camera. Press it again to go back to where you were. And the most useful one is the period key, or delete, whatever the one that's next to the 0, and that'll zoom in to whatever you're selecting. So even if I get lost in this void, if I'm selecting the cube, which I'll get into this menu here, but I can select the cube and press that number pad period, and then it'll zoom straight in. Okay, that's the basics of navigation. Next, how do we manipulate objects? Because I imagine you're going to be putting a lot of cards and tokens and other things into the scene. How do we move them and resize them and rotate them? Well, for here, I would use the keyboard shortcuts, and I will have a cheat sheet linked down below so you can easily remember all those shortcuts. But there's not too many you need to remember. Or there are, I don't know. Depends on your memory. Okay, so if we open this menu here, we can see the different ways we can transform an object. We have the location, the rotation, and the scale. So to manipulate an object on its location axis, we can press G, and that moves the object around. But it's a little hard to control exactly where we want to put it. So then we need to lock it into one of the axes, X, Y, and Z axis. So after we press G, and if you want to cancel, you press escape. So G, and if I press now X, see the cube will only go on the X axis. I press Y instead, it will go on the Y axis, and if you press Z, it'll go up and down, Z axis. Again, press escape to cancel it. Same goes for rotation and scale. Let's guess what the shortcuts are. So you probably guessed correctly. For rotation, we press R, and then likewise, we can rotate it around, and X will rotate on the X axis, Y rotate on the Y axis, and Z will spin it around. Same goes for scaling, which you use S, up and down, and when you press S, it will scale the whole thing uniformly, meaning it won't change the proportions, but if we press X, it will change on the X axis, Y axis, and Z axis. And always when you change the sizes of something, make sure to keep an eye that you don't make a negative number. Okay, you can easily, without noticing, basically turn it inside out, and that might cause a little problems down the line. So just make sure you always use positive numbers for this. So suppose we want to move the box around. So let's say this is gonna be a board game box, and I want to place it on the table, on the floor. So let's look at the scene from the side. I press 3, And suppose this y-axis is the floor, because that's 0 on the z-axis. Okay, so I'm gonna press G to move it, Z to move it up, and I'll slowly bring it up so it's sitting on the floor. And now, suppose I want this to be over here. One way to do it is to press G, Y, move it this way, G, X, and then move it like so. Control Z to bring it back. The way I like moving things when I create my board game layouts is by pressing G and then Shift Z. This basically tells Blender we want to move both on the x-axis and the y-axis, but not on the z-axis. And it locks it in basically to the same height. So we could move it to where we want it without having to fear that it will, look, if I didn't press that and I just moved the box to where I want it to be, it goes underneath the table. Blender would sort of try to guess what I'm trying to do. But if I press G and then Shift Z, it locks it. It says everything but Z, and then I can freely move it around without having to worry about it going down or up. I hope that makes sense. Let's bring it back to the middle. And same goes for everything else. Suppose, I don't know, I want it to go up and down on the y-axis, then press a G and then Shift Y, and then it will lock only the Z and the x-axis. Lock only the Z and the x-axis. Same thing goes for rotation and scales. You can play around with it, see what you can do, but I'm going to be really focusing on the tools I use the most. Okay, so let's move on to duplicating an object. Usually in board games we have a lot of the same components, so it's really important to know how to duplicate. The most basic way of doing this is pressing Shift D, and then you have a new object. Now, as you've seen, I moved it, it went underneath the table again. So my recommendation is that every time you duplicate an object, it automatically, by the way, the moment you duplicate an object, it automatically snaps to your mouse so you can already place it in its new position. If you want it to stay in the same position, just press Escape, but then it's in the exact same position. So what I do is, every time I duplicate something, I immediately press Shift Z, so it doesn't move up or down, and then I can place it where I want. So suppose this was, I don't know, a board game and we had 2 expansions, or maybe it's 3 game cubes, we want to put them around. So Shift D, duplicate, move, Shift D, duplicate. Okay, this is more than 3, but I think you get the idea. Now, it's important to note that Shift D creates a whole new object. And in Blender, there's 2 ways of copying objects. One is a full set of duplication, like I said, and there's a linked copy, a linked duplicate. Okay, this might sound a little complicated. They're essentially the same object, meaning if you edit one of them, the other will change. And this is good if you're making a lot of the same type of component, and suddenly you want to change something in one of them, and instead of having to go and change each one in turn, you can change them all at the same time. So to illustrate the differences between the 2 duplication modes, I have here, let's say this is a card, a white card, and if I choose the first duplication mode, Shift D, it creates a whole new instance of this card. Meaning, if I now change the material, and I'll get into this later, so this is now material 02, and I change the color to red, only this will change. But suppose this was a card back, and we want all the card backs to be the same. And I created a whole lot of decks all over the table, and then suddenly we changed the asset a bit. So then I would have to go to each one in turn and to change each one of those assets, even though they're supposedly supposed to be the same. So for that, we have the different duplication mode, which is a linked copy. So that would be Alt D. So this looks the same. Here, Alt D. But with one main difference. If I change this material, even create a whole new one, and I change it to blue, all of these objects will change. They are essentially the same object, And this type of duplication is very useful for this example, for instance, when all the objects are supposed to stay the same, and to save data. So if you have a very detailed mini and you have a few copies of it, it's better to Alt duplicate them, do a linked copy, and that will save the amount of data stored within the Blender file. If you want to separate these items later, you could always do it through this menu, Object Data Properties. And you see the number 8 here signifies that there's 8 objects with the same property. If I click this number, this object has become its own entity. And now we see on the other ones, it has 7. Okay, so this is a little advanced tip which might be useful down the road. Next, adding new objects. Okay, so duplicating is one way to add objects, but suppose we want to add something entirely different. Suppose we want a floor here. To do that, we press Shift A or Add, same menu here. We go to Mesh, and here we have all these options. We have planes, cubes, circles, UV spheres, icospheres, cylinders, cones, torsos, grids, and monkeys. So let's add a plane. That's what we need to make a floor. Now we have this plane. We want to resize it. So let's press S, scale it up. And there we have a floor. I want this to be on the floor. One way to do it is like we did before, look at it from the side, G, Z, move up. That's more or less accurate. The other way to do it is to turn on snapping, okay? Snapping will make sure that it will snap to those increments and make sure that your placement of everything is very precise. Sometimes you would want to do that. Another way to snap it exactly on the floor, and this is the way I do it all the time, I move the objects up into the air. I choose here snap to face rather than increment. And this basically means that once I press G, wherever my mouse is pointing to, the object will try to snap to the nearest face. And that's perfect for a floor. So if I press G and then I press Z to lock it to the Z axis, it'll automatically snap onto the floor. And this is really helpful when you have in new objects, they're floating in the air, you just want to get them down, lay on the table. This is the method I use. I just turn this on, snap it to the floor, and then turn it off again. So in board games, we have all sort of components, but they're usually either square or circular or cylinders or have a unique shape, which we won't try to model here. There's another way to do it, and you'll see it in a later tutorial on how to do like a unique token or unique meeple. So I don't want to get into the modeling side of things too much, and that's when I talked about edit mode, that's when you start modeling something and you can change it up a little bit. So I'm going to really focus on basic navigations. All right, so we have our basic scene of just a cube and a plane. Let me get into the different render views, because obviously this is not how it's going to look like in the final render. So if you look up here, we can see 4 different render modes to view our scene. We have wireframe mode, which shows you just the outlines of all the objects. Solid mode, which is what we've been using until now, which colors everything in gray, but it's to see the shapes and the basic layout of the scene. And then we have look div mode, which gives us a temporary lighting system to see the materials. So right now we don't have any materials. So for example, let's add a new material, just give it a random color, like red. And for the ground, the plane, let's give it black. Okay, so this will show us how everything would look like, but in the final render, it will look quite differently. Because you see, right now it doesn't take into account the light we have here. For that, we have rendered view, which shows us the final lighting. So you see, I move the light around. We can actually see it affecting our scene, the shadows, and everything. There's essentially 2 types of render systems in Blender. There's Eevee, which is real time, much faster, but not entirely accurate. And then we have Cycles, which is much slower, but will calculate all the lights in a realistic way and will take less effort to set up a realistic scene. So I would recommend using cycles, but if you have a low-end computer, it might be a little bit taxing on your system, then you might want to go with Eevee. For now, let's work in Eevee. The outliner. Right here we have a collection of all the objects we have in the scene. We have the camera, the light, the cube, and the plane. This is very helpful to find things that sometimes get lost in the scenes. For example, like I said before, you get lost, it's very easy to just click the cube and then period on the number pad to zoom right into it. If we had another cube and we lost it, if we had another cube and we lost it, we don't know where it is, it's very easy to find it in the outliner and also snap to it. I highly recommend, once you start creating your board game layout, to keep it as organized as possible. So I usually like to put the camera in a new collection, called it camera. Suppose you want to have a few angles of everything, so you keep all the cameras here. I do another collection for lights. Drag this here. And another for, you can say, assets. And keep all your assets here. And then you can even break it further. You know, you have a certain layout, you know, in-game, or just beautiful spread of all the components, and it makes it much easier afterwards to keep only what you want to see. So suppose you have a few different spreads, so you can turn one off and then turn one on again with these check marks. Well, actually, let's get into these right now. So over here you see there's a little eyeball and a camera. They represent what we can see in the viewport right now and what we will be able to see in the final render. You need to keep a close eye, no pun intended, on these, because suppose you didn't want this red cube in the final scene and you just pluck its eye out, it will still appear in the final render. So you see it still appears in the final render. So you want to make sure to turn it off both from the eyeball and from the camera. Render image, and then we don't see it in the final render. Another important one to note is up here you can add the selectable option. And this is important. For example, the floor, once we place it, we probably would not want to move it around, but we might select it by mistake, and that's really annoying. So if you disable the selectability of the plane, we won't be in danger of clicking it. And then we can easily select other objects, move them around, and it won't mess up our scene. We want to bring it back. To move it, we can just click it again, and then we can adjust it. Another shortcut for creating a new collection or to put something inside an existing one. Suppose we created a new a cube here. Up. Turn on snapping. Another shortcut for turning on and off snapping is Shift Tab. Okay, and snap to the ground. Okay, right now I created the cube. It's just floating out there, not inside any of these folders. So I can click M and then choose, this goes in assets, and then it will appear in assets. It's also really important to rename all your objects. So if this was the box, I would double click it and write box. If this was the floor, I'll double click it and write floor. And this is really important just to keep organized, especially if you need to pass this file on to someone else. It will make it much, much easier for him, or you open it like sometimes in the future. And, you know, it's just very helpful to be organized. Every scene needs lights. Okay, so we have a few different types of lights. The default scene comes with this point light, which you can move around. It just shoots out lights from a point. We have a spotlight, and this is especially good for if you're like doing a very moody scene, like a noir type board game. You want something very moody, I would recommend using that, and you can move it around with G. With R you can rotate it, and if you go down here you see you have the light bulb. That's where you can change the properties of the light. So I'm sorry, I have here a plugin which you would not have, so just change the amounts here, 100, maybe 1,000. There we go. Let's add another one, 10,000. And let's turn off this light. And lights work just like other objects. You want to turn them off both with the eyeball and with the render view. That's a spotlight. We can change the size of it and how strong the contrast is between the edge and the outside. Okay, so you see it's a little blurred, and here it's a little bit more cartoony, so-called. Next light would be a sun, and a sun, the actual object, it doesn't matter where it is. Okay, it can move it around, it won't affect the scene, but it does, if you move the direction, it will change the direction of the global light in the scene. So you can see the changes in the shadows and where the light is pointing from. Like a sun, basically. I would recommend using this lighting if you want something very neutral and not atmospheric, and that would light everything evenly. I would use a sun lamp. The last one is an area light, right here. And basically, rather than being a point, it shines the light from an area. So this could also have interesting effects, as if you have like a big professional studio light. So this could also come to very nice results. But again, it's all a matter of playing around with it. And I should make a caveat here. Everything in Blender is about playing around with it, figuring things out, solving problems, finding different solutions, and you might discover methods which are completely different than mine, and they're totally valid. That's the whole point of Blender. You can do anything you want. I'm basically giving you sort of these guidelines you can start from without being lost. Okay, and one more thing. Now you notice there aren't any lights in my scene anymore, but we can still see. I mean, if we render this view, let me just adjust the camera here. Oops. If we render this, we can still see the cube. How can that be? Well, it's because the actual background is lighting the scene a bit. If we want complete control over our lighting, we can go here to the world properties, and here, see the background has a color, which we can change. Completely black, completely white, and then the strength of the lighting from that background. So you see, once we turned it all the way down, then we're truly in pure blackness. And then, ooh, turn on a light. This almost seems like a horror movie now. The red cube. Materials. So you saw how I turned this cube into red before, but let's get into this a little bit in depth. Materials is basically how the object is going to look like. If you want to make it look like a card, then you need to choose the right material for it. If you wanted to have a wooden texture, there's a way to do it. And if you want to make it look like plastic, that's a different material. And in order to set up the materials, you can either use this menu over here, which will give you only a limited amount of control, or you can go to the shading tab over here and use the node system to have complete control over your materials. And that would be really important, actually. Another way to do it is over here in the layout. You see all these, should have probably mentioned this in the beginning, but all these windows can be adjusted. You can move things around. You can change every single window into something else. Turn this into another viewport. And you can open new ones. You just go to a corner where you see a plus sign and you drag this out, and then you'll just have another window. So we can turn this one into a shader editor so we can see what is happening while we change these properties over here. So first of all, to change color, I showed you this before. You just go to base color, here or here, doesn't matter, and you can change it to whatever color you want. Suppose you want to turn this into a box or a card or something with an image. Point here, you go to image texture, you go open and navigate to whatever image you want, for example this duck picture, and it will apply it to the object. But why is it all messed up? That's because Blender has a default way of wrapping around objects. Right now it's projecting this image from the top and it's wrapping around. So let's say this was a board. We would have to make it much thinner, and we would need the image to just be on the top side. So let's make it thinner, scale on the Z-axis, and we can open this here with N and see the exact dimensions. So I imagine a board would be, sorry, very thin. I guess 1.5 millimeters would make sense, and you can just type this out and say millimeters. And 2x2 is a pretty big board, but let's make it smaller. Let's say 350 millimeters by 350 millimeters. We want to snap it back on the floor. Turn on snapping, G, Z, and zoom in. Now we want the material to be projected exactly on the square. In order to do that, we need to go to the node systems here. And here we have the image. It's connecting to the base color. And we need to add, with Shift A, a mapping node. Connect the vector to the vector. And a texture coordinate. And connect the generated to the vector. Generated is basically projecting the image from the top straight onto the object. This is a trick to make it fit exactly. It will have its limitations. It won't always work, but this is an easy way to do it. If we want to control how reflective the surface is, we need to play around with the roughness over here. Okay, or down here, same thing. Put it all the way down. This now essentially became a mirror. Okay, so if we bring the light, bring it down. Oh, we have snapping on, so we might want to turn that off. Bring the light down. Okay, now you see, we can see this ball of light because this is essentially a mirror. If we turn the roughness back up, we'll slowly become fully opaque. And now there's no reflections at all. Okay, so for a board game, we want to keep it like around 2.3, I guess, something like that. But if suddenly we have this angle and the glare is way too much, we can turn down the specular. And this will still light the board, but it won't be affected by the light as much. And that's sometimes really important for board game assets where the art is key and we want to show off the art. Okay, so we can just do it a little tiny bit. We also have metallic, which if you have metal coins, for example, is the only example I can think of. You can turn on metallic all the way and this automatically makes something look metallic. Always use either 1 or 0, nothing in between. And that's it, more or less. This covers the basics for materials. There's a lot more that can go into it, but this will help give you a head start. Finally, we have our image. We now want to focus our camera on it and to render. So let's select our camera and we can start to move it towards our board because right now it's really far away. So if I press G, that's a little hard to navigate. I can press G, X, G, Z, G, Y. You can also press G, Shift Z like before to move it on the same height. Okay, and then now we need to rotate it. So you see basically what I'm getting. This can get very annoying and hard. So an easier way to navigate is by doing the shortcut Shift tilde, and then we basically unlocked no clip mode. We can look around the scene using the mouse and using WSAD to move around and QE to move up and down. And then it's very easy to frame our shot on exactly what we want. Maybe like this. And clicking the left mouse button to lock it. Easy as that. And if we want to add more angles, then you want to add another camera. You press Shift D. Shift D, which is basically duplicating the same camera. Or Shift A and add a new camera. So let's do that. Put it in our folder. And now we want to shift to this camera. We can do so by doing the shortcut Control numberpad 0, or by going to View, Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera. And then we can take this camera, do Shift tilde again, and navigate to our new angle. Okay. Suppose we want like something like really close like this. Then we can shift between these two cameras by doing the same shortcut. Control numberpad 0, control number pad 0. It's always best to have more options open rather than moving the same camera and then you lose your previous angle. And another tip is if we are in the viewport and suddenly we see, oh, we really want to capture it from this angle, but now we need to find a camera or create a camera and navigate all the way here. So the best way to do that is just to grab your camera, and there's another shortcut which is Control Alt 0, and it would automatically move your camera to the right position that you're looking at. It won't always work because you have a different focal length and all these other parameters which you can adjust, but it will be pretty close. So speaking of these parameters, you can adjust them to get exactly the shot you want. Just like a true camera, you can change the focal length, and we're selecting now the wrong camera, so we're not seeing it. So let's click on the right camera or select the outline over here. And let me just close this so we can see better. If you open another window and you want to close it, you just right click between the windows, join areas, and then you click towards the area you want to shut down. So here, if we play around with the focal length, then we'll have the sort of zoom in and zoom out. This basically changes the size of the camera lens. So this will be like a telephoto lens, and this would be a wide lens. I usually go for 50. Clip start is if you want to do very, very close-ups on small components. Sometimes it's better to bring the clip start all the way to the end, 001, so things don't clip out of their frame. Depth of field is also really important to give you that out of focus look, which makes renders very realistic. So you can turn that on here and use the distance to see exactly where you're supposed to be focused on. And you're not going to have this. This is also another add-on. I apologize, but it will essentially do the same thing. So I'm going to just speed through this, where I'm going to create a very basic scene of what is essentially a box and a game board. I'm setting up the lighting here. I'm creating the UV texture of the box on all the sides, and I do get into that in a different tutorial. I think it's a little bit too much for this one, but just for our purposes, let's put the scene together and then go into how to render it. Alright, what I essentially did now, I created a very basic scene with a box and a board, and now let's learn how to render this. So first of all, we need to look at rendered view, and we're looking at its cycles. If we want to do Eevee instead, then very basically I'll just tell you turn on ambient inclusion, bloom, screen surface reflections, and things will look a little bit better. Another thing to do is to go to shadows, do high bit depth, and turn up the cube size. But let's go to cycles and we'll get all that automatically. We have our scene here, everything looks fine. I would turn on denoising in the viewport, otherwise everything looks like grainy and it's annoying to work like that, so you can turn on denoising. And turn off noise threshold in the render settings. Then underneath that, we can see that there is a sample number and the time limit. Now, 4096 samples might be a little bit too much for your system and it might crash, and we don't need that many. For a render like this and similar ones of board game layouts, I find that 500 is at most how much we need, and it might even be less than that. Another way to make sure your system doesn't crash is to set a time limit. So for example, 10 seconds. And then it would render the image, and after 10 seconds, it would stop. And the amount of samples it got to, that's the amount of samples it managed to get to. So let's see how this works out. Go to render and render image, or press F12. And see, the scene is rendering, becoming clearer and clearer. And we managed to get 81 samples from a 10-second limit. So obviously sometimes we would want more of that because you can see a little bit of jittering here and the quality is fine. The longer you leave it on, the better the quality will be. And here we have our very basic render of what could be a box and a board of a really cool board game. That's how simple it is. To save it, we go to image, save as, and just save it, call it whatever you want and save it at your desired location. If you want to create additional renders and to save this one, just go to the next slot, number 2, Okay, so we have our other camera here. Let's snap to it. Control 0. And let's render that. And it cleans it up. All right, and now we can even toggle between our two different renders, slot 1 and slot 2, or just using the numbers on the keyboard. And that is essentially it. So I hope that was very informative and not too confusing. I try to cram as much as possible into this tutorial to give you all the basics as fast as possible. But this is still very time consuming. You saw through that sped up scene where I wanted to create just a box and a board, and you saw how long that took me. So what if there was a way where I could generate these assets with just one click? Sounds crazy, right? Well, not anymore, because I created a special Blender kit just for that. And here we go. So essentially this board game Blender layout will make the process of creating those board game layouts as easy as a snap. Simply drag and drop. So you saw how long it took me to create that box. All you need to do now is drag and drop. And not only that, the UV of the material is already set in a way where if you throw in a new texture, it will wrap around automatically. Okay, we didn't get into this one, but I have more tutorials about that. And if we wanted to create a deck of cards, we can just grab a deck of cards and throw it in. And not only that, it already comes with built-in textures to make them look realistic. And if we wanted, I don't know, meeples, tokens, token piles, we have two variations, and things automatically will stick to the ground. And now you have the tools to know how to move them around, change the materials, and adjust everything to be exactly the way you want it to. So if you're interested in the shortcut, just visit this link below and you'll be able to purchase the Board Game Blender Kit. I've worked months on optimizing this to be as simple as possible with added guidelines of how to change textures and easy to read materials and basically everything to make this as approachable for anyone, no matter what skill level they are. So I hope you found this useful, and I'm hoping to create more tools in the future to help board game creators show their vision to the world in the coolest way possible. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to see more of this type of content, please subscribe to this channel and like this video and click the bell icon so you'll be notified immediately when I have more tutorials, new products, and anything that I can come up with that will help you create amazing board game layouts. Or maybe other things, who knows, maybe I'll even teach animation soon, how to create animated GIFs, or you know what, if you have any ideas for something that you would like to see and learn about, just write down in the comments below and let me know and I'll see if I can get to it.